thought I was an alpha male. But really, I was afraid. I've observed a cycle play out in my life. And this cycle usually goes something like this. I would fall for a girl, feel very attracted, develop a deep interest in her. There'd be sparks, there'd be chemistry, there'd be this special connection. And eventually things would develop and we'd get closer and form a relationship. But as time would go on and we would open up more, she would make herself more vulnerable, mirroring my own level of vulnerability. There would always reach a certain point where it was too much for me. I couldn't actually deal with the prospect of commitment. Now, in my mind, there were 1,000 reasons why she wasn't right for me. She was too intense. She was boring. She wasn't on my level. I lost interest in her sexually. All these reasons and all these stories. But the reality was, I was just afraid. And part of why I would put myself unconsciously into relationships which weren't really good for either of us was that I was afraid to be in a relationship that was right. I was afraid of rejection. The kind of rejection that really meant something when it comes from someone who really means something. So I would keep myself in these superficial relationships for short periods of time, tell myself I was getting bored, break up, move on, get with another girl. And this cycle went on for years. Now, in my mind, I told myself that maybe I was just a player. Maybe I was an alpha male, and that's what an alpha male does. They get what they want, and then they move on, and they repeat that toxic process. But the longer I go on this journey of retention, which is really a journey of ascension, I don't want to get too caught up in this label of retention, but the algorithm loves it, so I'm going to keep dropping that terminology. But really, we're using retention as a tool for ascension. And when I say ascension, we are literally moving the locus of being. We are moving our center of gravity out of the root chakra, the Muladhara, the survival center, the domain of our base instincts. The root chakra being all about power, money, our connection to earth, our connection to basic needs like food, shelter, security. As we retain our life essence and not only commit to the physical act of withholding from ejaculation, but as we allow this process to take over our mind, purifying it, purifying not just our actions, but our intention. Jesus Christ said, "Whosoever looks at a woman to lust after her has already committed adultery with her in his heart." As we realize that retention is only 20% of the game, if not less, and spiritual purification is really the path that is going to give us compound gains, exponential gains in every aspect of life. As we commit to this path, we begin to ascend up the spine, rising to the higher centers, so that we are now no longer functioning out of a base survival instinct, but we are stepping into the realm of infinite possibility, wherein many paths open up, wherein the right direction, the sole purpose, the reason that you're here becomes abundantly clear. Many of you don't know what you want or what you're here for. This was me for almost 2 decades. I had no idea where I was going, what I was meant to be doing. But there's a reason for that, my friend. It's not because God's withholding from you. It's not because you haven't had enough life experience. It's because you've been living out of your survival center. You've been living out of your lower instincts. You see, the root level consciousness, the base level consciousness, which much of the world is operating from today, is all about acquisition, getting. It's all about material accumulation. It's all about power dynamics. And this is a very low, limited level of consciousness. when you begin to rise to your heart, you begin to perceive the truth behind the veil that is presented to you. Your heart is an instrument of divination. In ancient times, every king would have a wizard, or a warlock, or an oracle, or a diviner, a witch. And the responsibility of this diviner, a person in touch with the divine, was to acquire knowledge from the unseen realm. In the Bible stories, these were the prophets. Now, these people would have certain rituals that they would practice. Shamans in indigenous cultures. And these rituals would allow them to step into the spirit realm. Whether it was certain dances they would practice, fasting, certain psychedelic compounds they would ingest, entheogens, en-theos, God within, a substance that reveals God within. But whatever their practice, it would allow them to see the bigger picture, to see from a higher perspective. You see, in ancient times, a king was charged with the responsibility to protect. Their function was largely one of a warrior. So they would often be cut off from things of a divine nature. But these shamans, these holy people, these spiritists, would step into this unseen realm and bring back knowledge, pull back knowledge. As you begin to ascend into the higher centers, your heart will begin to open. Your heart is actually the first part of you which develops in your mother's womb. Did you know that your entire body, the entire fetus, grows around the heart? This is the core of your being. And we've been programmed and taught to live either from our head or from our balls. If you were to look at a Curlian photography image, or to use an instrument that was tuned to the frequency of the human electromagnetic field, which is shaped like a torus, just like the universe itself, just like the cosmos, just like the energy field which encircles the earth. If you were to look using one of these instruments at the human body, you would see a spiraling torus field almost like the shape of an apple, which emanates out of the heart, travels up and around on both sides, comes back down and back up through the center and around again. If you're familiar with the microcosmic orbit, an ancient Taoist practice, this is what they teach. How to circulate your life energy, how to circulate your sex energy. It follows the energy pathway of the torus. That's what your energetic blueprint looks like. Now, mediums, sensitives, people who can see auras, they will tell us that a person who has a closed heart, a person who is living in fear, insecurity, a person who is holding on to past hurts, traumas, pains, to the point where they have withdrawn their heart. A sensitive person who sees these fields will tell us that their torus, their aura, their electromagnetic potential, their capacity to store and circulate power is very small. I thought I was an alpha male because I could just use women. And feel little to no remorse. But actually, I was very afraid. I was so afraid of being invalidated, being seen as small and weak. I was so afraid of being hurt. I was so angry over past hurts, betrayals, that I became very weak and very small as a person. This was further fueled by my addiction to masturbation, pornography. Finally said it the first time. I was so addicted to the dopamine hit of attracting new women, of being the center of attention, of finding new playthings. But in reality, I was afraid, insecure, needy. I needed that attention. I needed to know that I was important, that I was seen. I needed those continuous hits of dopamine because my life essence was so small and weak. This is the limitation of philosophies such as red pill, black pill. When I hear this kind of conversation now, although I once was very excited by it, when I hear these sentiments that come from these men who have been so hurt and become so jaded that they've allowed their worldview to be poisoned and shaped by a philosophy based on insecurity. Projecting that women are fundamentally flawed by nature, that they cannot be trusted, that an authentic relationship is just not possible due to the nature of women. I truly used to think like this. But it reached a point where I realized, as I began to study manifestation, as I began to go deeper in my spirituality, as I began to go deeper with my retention journey, I realized that I was creating that through my projection. And as you begin to learn more about your true identity, and when I say learn more, I really mean remember, you will realize that you are creating all of the situations that you face in your daily life based on, now listen closely, based on the emotional content that you have inside you. Let's say, for example, that when you were a kid at school, you were eating a red apple in class, and your teacher was in a particularly bad mood that day, and he caught you eating in class, and he abused you in front of the entire class. Called you every name under the sun, traumatized you, scared you. And now, every time you go to the supermarket and see a red apple sitting there on the shelf, you begin to feel anxious and afraid, and you don't know why. This is what we're doing. Now think about that in terms of how it applies to relationship pain that you've experienced. Because all addictive behavior is based on feelings of disconnection from self and from those in our life. So the further you go on your journey of awakening, of remembering who you are, the more you're going to be confronted with these projections, these ideas, these beliefs that you've been holding, particularly about women, but also about the true nature of masculinity, what it really means to be a man. And if your experience is anything like mine, you're going to begin to realize that true masculinity is about unshakable commitment. True masculinity is about knowing in your spirit, as the oracle on the Matrix says to Neo, no one can tell you when you're in love. And being the one is just like being in love. You just know it through and through. Balls to bones. You're going to begin to have strong convictions as you stop throwing this energy into the fire, as you bring back those 10,000 sheep, those scattered thoughts which are continuously wandering off, checking out that girl's ass, checking out that girl's smile, wondering if that girl's paying attention to you, noticing you, going through that mental conversation, that mentation, that masturbation of wondering if she's interested in you, wondering what you're going to say to her. Before you know it, you've wasted minutes of time. You've wasted electromagnetic energy, which is what your body, mind, soul complex is powered by. Life essence. You've just diffused it into the atmosphere. You haven't done something purposeful with it. You've allowed it to be stolen from you. Once you begin to bring this back, consolidate it, build it up, circulate it, sublimate it, channel it into higher activities, you're going to have conviction. This is a very strong word, which alludes to a state of sureness, certainty, and is closely related to the word commitment. Because when you are convicted, when you know in your balls, in your bones, in your heart, committing becomes the most natural thing to do. And I'm not just talking about committing to a woman, because really that is the cherry on the cake. I'm talking about committing to your purpose, committing to your practices, committing to your discipline, becoming a disciple of the path. So, for all of this talk about procrastination and uncertainty, which I hear so many men talking about, lack of time, lack of resources, I want you to see that this is all bullshit. These are all excuses that your mind has created based on diffusing and wasting your energy, my friend. It's so much simpler than I ever realized. Having perfect clarity. To think of all of the personality tests and soul journeys and psychedelics and hours of meditation and all of these things, all these activities I did trying to get clarity, trying to realize, what am I here for? When that whole time, all I had to do was give up my lust. Your sexual energy is the foundation of your masculinity. All you have to do is reclaim it. Stop seeking an outlet in images of women, whether mental, virtual, or material. Bring back your power, re-own your power, and it will begin to rise. It will begin to open your heart, which is the portal to divinity, which is the portal to the unseen realm, which is the faculty of extrasensory perception, which allows you to know things that the mind could not possibly know. This is the heart. This is the source of intuition. This is what allows you to know exactly what people are thinking and feeling without them having to say a word. This is power, my friend. It's time for you to re-own it.